Many of you have just come from a meal shared together, a sort of recreation of that final supper that Jesus shared with his disciples in the readings we've heard tonight. Much like Jesus and the 12, many of you sat around tables, and you laughed and you talked and you ate. And as you did this, you also commemorated the last time that Jesus sat in a room with his friends around him, sharing a meal, sharing a cup. Others have come from work or just from a normal Thursday because, to be clear, in John's Gospel, the Last Supper occurred on a regular night. This is contrary to the Synoptic Gospels, which set the Last Supper as the same time as the Passover meal. For the other Gospels, the Passover lamb that was slain was the meal Jesus shared with the disciples. John, however, places the Last Supper before the Passover. In his story, the Paschal lambs are slain the next day, what is Good Friday for us. And in John, Jesus dies on the same day as the slaughter of the lambs in the temple, a memory, a ritual of the Israelites in Exodus, daubing their doorposts with the blood of a perfect lamb in hopes of God's saving mercy. But I think the reason John tells a different story of the Last Supper is because the focus of John's story isn't about the meal, not about the Passover. John is focused on the foot washing itself, sort of like tonight. Was it about the meal? Was that what you came for? Because the meal is only part of the grace that's offered on this day. I remember the first time I had my feet washed. I remember sitting right there and waiting and feeling very afraid. I felt like a little girl who had gotten her dress dirty before a party. I had tried all day to keep my feet clean, all day, knowing I would have no choice but to bear them in front of everyone and allow my confirmation sponsor to wash them. In the end, though, I could not keep them clean, and they were washed anyway. I followed a command to sit and to allow myself to be touched in a very intimate way in front of an awful lot of people that I didn't know very well at the time. And something came loose in my heart, and I received a blessing on that night, dirty feet and all. As Jesus kneels to wash the feet of the disciples, the whole thing is becoming real to them. In this chapter of John, the miracles and the journey are coming to an end, and we are moving into what becomes a very fast series of events, all leading to the cross. The inevitable death of Jesus has become a terrifying fact for the 12. They are beginning to accept that they really are on their last trip, that everything he said, the parables and the strange proclamations about his hour approaching, these things are turning out to be true. And so, Jesus washes the feet of his friends, because his message that night to those he loved until the end, the message was one of servant love. It was a message without words, performed only with the sounds of pouring water, the rustling of a towel, perhaps people walking by on the street outside. Jesus could have preached a sermon or spoken another parable to those gathered in that upper room, but instead he knew that the only thing he had left to teach them was the importance of love, the importance of washing feet. I think Jesus knew that the only way to show these men, whom he loved so much, was to take on the role of a servant, to dribble the water over their sore and dusty feet. On that night, he called his community to real and vulnerable love, and he knew that only a love that is real could prepare the disciples for the death that was going to come. The love that Jesus talked of and commanded of us, the love of which foot washing is a symbol, is a love that is very different from what we may think. Jesus preached subversive love, washing and making clean the feet of Judas, even though he knew that those feet would carry Judas to betray him. Jesus washed the feet of Peter, though he knew Peter would deny him the very next day. And he did all of this to underscore that the new commandment of love trumped everything else. Love one another, he told the disciples. Though they were all about to abandon him, he loved them still. The kind of love that Jesus taught, that subversive love, it opens in the face of being uncomfortable. It raises its chin in the face of danger and fear. It chooses to live the values we profess, sometimes, like tonight. It is choosing to be vulnerable, to take that walk from the pew to the chair, to untie your shoes, to allow yourself to be touched by a person who is trying to love you as they were commanded to, a person who wants to offer you a blessing. Peter didn't want that blessing, and neither do we much of the time. But receiving this blessing is the only way to be made clean. Tonight, powerful feelings will be set loose in this room. Sorrow, regret, loss, maybe even fear. Tonight we have gathered, we have eaten, and soon we must strip the altar and say goodbye. Tomorrow, we must walk to the hill where Christ will be crucified. We must witness the horror and the example of what being emptied out looks like. The example of what subversive love really is. We too must see that we will die. We want to love like Christ, and I think we just don't know the way. But here's the trick. You can't learn how to love like this until you have received love like this. The disciples would not have known how to love as they were called to do unless Jesus, by washing their feet, showed them how. You cannot love like that until you have let Jesus love you, all of you. Dirty feet, faltering faith, imperfectly practiced Lent, clinging sins. Even the you that sometimes lives as though you've never heard of Jesus, much less profess to be one of his followers. You must let Jesus love you, the real you. So tonight, you have only one job: to let yourself be loved. After you let someone wash your feet, after you receive and learn that love, then you can offer it to someone else. But first you must receive. You must learn how. It's hard to know where to start, so we have very helpfully set up chairs and basins, some pitchers of water. The choir will sing, and I hope you will come forward. Cry if you must. It's okay to feel afraid, but do come. Come and be loved. Come and be clean.